We are off and running on a Wednesday evening here from the Circus Sportsbook in downtown Las Vegas, Nevada. That is Jonathan Von Tobel. I am Tim Murray. We've got a Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Final tonight. The Florida Panthers at Madison Square Garden against the New York Rangers, where the Panthers are a road favorite tonight against the President's Cup winners. And then the highly anticipated Western Conference Finals, the Dallas Mavericks, a 4.5-point road underdog against the Minnesota Timberwolves. VSiN PrimeTime is presented by DraftKings. And that, once again, Jonathan Von Tobel. I am Tim Murray. We are going to head to Madison Square Garden in less than 15 minutes. John Ehlers, who will be on the radio call of Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, will join us. Jim Peterson, Timberwolves TV analyst, later on this hour as well. JVT, Minnesota laying 4.5, and we have seen some series prices get as high as minus $2 in favor of the Minnesota Timberwolves. There's a lot of belief in the Wolves. Ironically enough, a team that was an underdog in the first round of the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, an opponent that they swept, as we know, in the Phoenix Suns. So the market has definitely come around here, realized its mistakes, and understood that this Timberwolves team, which, look, the numbers would tell you, are undervalued. 8-3, straight up and against the spread, covering by about double digits per game. They've been absolutely brilliant in shattering market expectations coming up to this point. And to give the betting market some credit, the market came around last series. The initial move for the Denver and Minnesota series price was toward the Minnesota Timberwolves, and we're seeing it here again. So it's not like the market's been wrong both times, and then, of course, came back here now that we're in the Western Conference Finals. Market snapped back to reality a bit when you talked about the Western Conference semis between them and the Nuggets. So I think it makes some sense. What I find interesting is, and maybe it was just more anti-Los Angeles Clippers than anything else, Tim, but you go back to that first round series, as I kept calling them, right? The reincarnation of the 2017 Golden State Warriors, the Dallas Mavericks, market was all over them. You couldn't stop betting them games, series, and then that turned in the series against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And, of course, here again in this series, market moving against Dallas. So it's pretty interesting. Not the change for me when it comes to the Minnesota Timberwolves from a market standpoint. I think it's more interesting that the market has turned on Denver to an extent, or should be Dallas to an extent, and really started to bet against them consistently from the last series and now up to this point.
Yeah, I was going to say, now you mentioning the fact that they bet against this Dallas team with Oklahoma City, I guess throws a little bit in the face of this. But is it more people betting against Dallas or people buying in on this Minnesota Timberwolves team? You've been in on them for a while. We've got a discussion to hash out here regarding JVT's future situation with this Minnesota Timberwolves team, but it does feel like a lot of people are all in on this Minnesota team as they now, once again, depending on where you look, minus 185 series price, I would say, is the consensus, JVT, but we see one shop here in town as high as minus 200 in favor of the T-Wolves.
It's probably more pro-Minnesota than it is anti-Dallas. It's hard to be anti-Dallas when you look at what this team has done defensively to this point, and especially over the last 30-ish games. Remember, they went into the regular season, into the postseason, 16-4 straight up and against the spread in their last 20 regular season games. So they have been very good for a very long time since they shifted their starting lineup. So it's not like this is something new that we have seen here, but I think this equates to more pro-Minnesota. You see the way that they handled Phoenix, how good they are defensively, and the way that they defended Denver throughout the course of that series. I think the upside is really strong. And I'm hardly the only person who believed in Minnesota. There's a lot of sharp people who shaped the market who believed in this Minnesota team for a really long time. And I think that it's just more people hopping on the train. There were stronger market indications, obviously, in the first round, but I think everybody's kind of conformed to the thought that, no, Minnesota's a very good team and a legitimate threat to win not only the Western Conference, but the NBA Finals.
Like every day, we're up and running live on YouTube for free in the first hour, youtube.com/VSiN Live. Eastern Conference Final gets going in Madison Square Garden, at Madison Square Garden, I should say. This courtesy of Evan Abrams. The Rangers are just the second team to be a home dog in a Game 1 of multiple series in the same playoffs as in the President's Trophy era, which goes back to 1986. The 2012 Phoenix Coyotes were the other team to accomplish said feat. So we've had Johnny Lazarus on here a handful of times. I'm sure he will be there at Madison Square Garden tonight. But interesting to note, for a second consecutive series, they swept the Washington Capitals. then they were a perceived underdog in a good chunk of their series that got them here to the.
They weren't perceived against Carolina. They were the underdog all the way through.
Yep.
I think they were underdogs in every single game, if I remember correctly. There was a game in Madison Square Garden, which floated around like pick and in that range, depending on where you shopped. I think they closed as a small favorite. But no, the market, you talk about the market being stubborn and not moving at all. It has not. And I think you kind of understand this to an extent. So Carolina, I think if you've looked at past years, analytically has kind of been a darling. Their even strength numbers have always been very, very good. And we even talked about the even strength numbers in that series against the Rangers, where Carolina had theoretically, statistically, outplayed them at even strength. And yet they lose that series. And now you have here, Tim, a Florida team that just got out of that series with Boston. They whooped the Bruins. Like there was a lot of different metrics that pointed to a very skewed strength in favor of the Florida Panthers at even strength on 5-on-5. So now you get into this series, it kind of does make some sense where maybe the market was wrong, but there were a lot of numbers that pointed to Carolina deserving to be favored the way they were. Maybe not to the degree, but favored. And now you get here a team that some have called a team of destiny potentially, but a high-end team in Florida. I feel like it kind of makes some sense, but the Rangers keep answering the call, so maybe they're going to do it again.
Well, we were sitting here before the show, and I was contemplating, like, do I play Florida on the series price? Still thinking about it, but I was looking at the board behind us. It was minus 145 in favor of the Panthers, plus 125 on the Rangers. That is now minus 152. So some late money coming in here at Circa, at least, on that series price. Minus 150, we'll call that the consensus price on the Florida Panthers in this particular series. Over-under in that game tonight is sitting at 5.5 for that one. Minus 150 as we see.
Can't lay minus 152 when the market's at minus 150.
That is true. Can't pay that extra 2 cents. You got to be shopping around. Got to save those pennies. Penny saved is a penny earned. So we'll get more from Madison Square Garden coming up in 10 minutes. John Ehlers, who will be on the national radio call of the Panthers and Rangers Eastern Conference Final. He will join us on the show here in just a little bit. Late last night, Jonathan Von Tobel, some are calling it a catastrophic loss for...
What are we doing? What are you doing? What's happening?
The Indiana Pacers last night. I was seeing if we could get the tweet up there that you put out there last night. So my question to you, as you were a believer in the Pacers, that this would go deep. Last night's result, was it something that was discouraging in the sense that the Pacers should have won that game?
Yes.
However,
I consider them winners. I actually think they're up 1-0.
But they aren't.
I'll make my case at the window.
But do you...
When they lose in 5 games. Like, no. Look at game 1.
So, as we take a step back, is this a situation from last night? We'll dive into this game a little bit later on. I know you've got a take on the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. I can't believe you're getting involved in that again.
We're going back. Ready to get hurt again.
Was this a situation where you're like, okay, Pacers are going to be live in every single game. They might still win this series. Or was this a spot where you said, a la 2018 Cavaliers-Warriors with the LeBron James meme against J.R. Smith? Yeah, that was their chance, and now it's lost. Celtics in 5. You have a Pacers plus 2.5 ticket in pocket. We are still hoping that this thing goes 6, lands right there in the middle. Both of us be winners.
I blame you. It's bad juju. Absolutely.
So, all kidding aside, how do we look at and how do we dissect Rick Carlisle's Pacers losing last night in overtime?
Let the record show I wasn't kidding. I blame you. Look, I think if I'm Rick Carlisle and I go to that locker room, the message is, boys, we're in this series. Nobody thought that we could win anything. Nobody thought. Everybody was talking about, hey, how short is it? What's going to go down? Will the Celtics be the Celtics and blow a game and give it to us? No. We came in here off of Game 7.
What was that voice?
TD Garden, and we pushed this team to the limit. Now, we made mistakes.
Push it to the limit.
And we lost this game because of mistakes. I'm not blaming anybody. Tyrese Halliburton. This is Rick Carlisle. He's doing this in the locker room. Not blaming anybody.
He blamed himself, though.
Yeah, he should have called in timeout and advanced the ball. But regardless,
should have fell.
We're in. Now, that's a different conversation. I think you're wrong there. We should talk about that. Regardless, no, I don't think that you're going catastrophic. It falls apart because I personally think when you look at the way, because you invoked the LeBron James, J.R. Smith, ridiculous Game 1 of the NBA Finals.
One of the most dominant performances we've ever seen, and they lost and then got swept.
Yeah, I think that Warriors team was just so good that was, like, you needed that one. And even if they got that one, I don't know if you were going on to be competitive in that series, you know? I think you were losing 4 straight. I think that this Celtics team, as we talked about, you can get to them with the way you play offensively if you're the Indiana Pacers. So, no, I don't think this falls apart from there. I think that you are a team that plays good enough on offense that you're going to be able to have another one of these games again against the Boston Celtics. You did things on the court that I think translate to another matchup. And the most important thing for me is you look at the box score, you look at what they did, you watch that game. Tim, there was no part of the game yesterday that I thought, like, ooh, they can't do that again. There was no 47% shooting performance from 3 or 60% from the floor or anything like that. There were things that they were doing that I think they can continue to work. And I think that gives you confidence that, yes, it's a catastrophic loss, as one brilliant and handsome man put on social media yesterday. But I think in general, it's one of those things that you move on and you fight on.
By the way, that Jaylen Brown 3, not only did it force overtime, got the Boston Celtics team total over as well. It was sitting there at 114. He hits the 3, forces overtime. Celtics up 1-0. Who will take a 1-0 lead in the Eastern Conference Final on the ice? We'll find out next.
This is VSiN PrimeTime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
For a limited time only, we're offering our annual subscription at an unbeatable price here at VSiN. Normally priced at $240. You can now grab your annual sub for $199. And if you sign up with the promo code PRIME, P-R-I-M-E, you're going to get 2 months for free. So that's 14 months of access, all for less than $200. Check it out now, VSiN.com/subscribe. Very much worth the price. You can check it out. You have all access to the live streams, all of the betting articles, and more. Very much worth it. Check it out now. VSiN.com/subscribe. Promo code PRIME. Get those 14 months for less than 50 cents a day.
That is Jonathan Von Tobel. I am Tim Murray. It is VSiN Prime Time. We are live on the DK Network and on YouTube right now, youtube.com/VSiN Live. We will head to Minneapolis and get a preview for Game 1 of Timberwolves and Mavericks coming up in 15 minutes with Jim Peterson, who is the TV analyst for the Minnesota Timberwolves. But right now, we head to our progressive guest line and bring in the national radio play-by-play voice of the Stanley Cup postseason. John Ollers joins us live from Madison Square Garden, where, John, I know it's loud, and folks in New York are licking their wounds after a Game 7 loss on the hardwood to turn their attention to the ice. But looking at the goaltenders, I think that is going to be such a fascinating discussion as we get into this series, where you've got Bobrovsky for the Panthers and Shesterkin for the Rangers. As we head into this series, who would you, at this point, John, give an edge to in the net?
I would say probably Igor Shesterkin. He's faced more work. He's faced more, I think, high danger chances, and that's where you start. You're starting to slice the onion pretty thin. How many saves has he made? How many quality chances has he looked at? And Shesterkin's probably, I think, had the more impressive body of work. The numbers are better for Igor. But, what you can say about Sergei Bobrovsky is he's made the big saves at the right time. And I've worked with many a goaltender in my career, and they all tell me it's not about how many. It's about when you make them. And that's part of the reason Bobrovsky's here. And the goaltending matchup is much like this entire series. It's just there's not much between these two clubs, and that's just another one of the examples because it's a great matchup to watch.
John, you mentioned the shots that Shesterkin has faced, the high-danger chances. Is that a symptom of a poor defense in front of him, and what does that look like against Florida? Will they be able to get the same amount of high-danger chances and shots? Will they be able to convert them at a higher rate?
There's some interesting stats when you look at the Rangers' journey to this point in the Eastern Conference Final. They've only outshot their opponent twice in the 10 games they've played so far to get here. And they've played teams that are very similar in that Florida and Carolina, I know they haven't played any games against Carolina yet, but they're teams that are high-volume shot teams, and oftentimes it's not about the quality of the shot. It's about getting the puck to the net, and that's where you create chaos. you get a tip every once in a while, you get a rebound every now and again, and everybody just drives hard to the net. And, that's the way the Carolina Hurricanes play for sure. So, where the Rangers are concerned, it's not really about the quantity, it's more about the quality. So I would say that, when you go up against opponents that like to throw a lot of pucks at the net, sometimes the numbers are going to skew it a little bit. I think New York's defense has been just fine. In fact, offensively speaking, they've gotten to the middle of the ice into those high danger areas, those slot shots that we talk about between the circles and between the face-off dots. Offensively speaking, the Rangers have gotten there much more than the Florida Panthers have in these playoffs, and that'll be another thing to watch.
John Allers will be on the national radio call of the Eastern Conference Final as well as the Stanley Cup on Sports USA, so make sure you check him out there when this game gets going. John, the Panthers made the run to the Stanley Cup Final last year, falling to the Vegas Golden Knights. How much, this might be cliche, but how much does that help them in this series, or is that a bit overblown when you think back to last year?
No, I think it goes a long way because you look at their journey last year to the Stanley Cup Final, and it started by beating the President's Trophy winning Boston Bruins in the first round. Huge upset. Bruins set records last season for victories and points in a season, and the President's Trophy goes to the team with the most points in the regular season. Here's the New York Rangers this year, President's Trophy winning team. So I think, as far as being an underdog or going up against teams that have, had great seasons, there's really nothing that's going to phase this Florida Panthers team. Primarily the reason I say that it goes a long way for them is they really didn't change a lot of personnel from last season to this season. So the been there, done that definitely exists for the Florida Panthers.
One of the things that we've talked about a lot, John, is the fact that the betting market doesn't really like New York a lot. They were underdogs in their last series against Carolina, underdogs here against Florida. Why would that be? Because it's a market that's based a lot on metrics and numbers and statistics. What does the market see here that is negative about New York that it doesn't really like?
I would say, at least where this matchup is concerned, the physicality of the Florida Panthers. And this time of year, this is when bigger teams, more physical teams have a tendency to have longer runs. The NHL has changed a lot in the last 2 decades, and the smaller players have a lot more success than they used to. In fact, they make it into the league at a much higher incidence than they ever used to. Players used to never get a chance because of their size, but this is the time of year when we fall back to old school hockey. We play very physical games. Players oftentimes get hurt and don't continue on through the postseason because of it. And the Florida Panthers are that team. They took the second most penalties in the regular season in the entire league. They do a very good job killing those penalties. And until they have problems killing penalties, that doesn't change anything in the way they play. And they've been very good in these playoffs killing penalties. I think that's the one thing at least that stands out for me.
John Allers once again joining us on our progressive guest line. He will be on the national call of Panthers and Rangers coming up 8 o'clock Eastern from Madison Square Garden. John, we talked about it in the Game 7s where you usually see lower scoring for opening periods because things get a little suppressed and no one wants to make a mistake. Here you are in Game 1. What do you expect from the jump from these two teams? Do you expect it to be a little more free and clear, a little more open ice? What's your expectation in the first period?
Well, my expectation would be that both teams are going to try to establish their game, and the simple definition of that is they're going to try to do what they do well. And for the Rangers, that's a team that takes advantage of opportunities, primarily on the power play. They're a very good special teams club. And the Florida Panthers are a team that's going to try to establish that physicality I was just talking about. So there's a good opportunity that we could see some special teams play in this opening period. Florida's penalty kill has been, I think, 18 of 19 in their last 7 games, so they're probably not afraid to take penalties against a very good New York power play. But with that said, both teams are going to try to, I guess, dictate, if you will. The Rangers are, like I said, a team that is able to get inside on teams with players like Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad. They're guys that aren't afraid to go to those tough areas, and Kreider is the best in the league at tipping pucks over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. I think he's got, a dozen more goals than the next closest player when it comes to tipping pucks, and that's where the Rangers do a lot of damage. So look for the teams to try to establish their game and do what they do best.
If Florida loses this series, what did New York exploit to get the win?
Probably special teams.
Yeah.
They really hurt Carolina on special teams the first 3 games of the series, and that they were able to build a 3-game lead in that series, and it was clearly the difference. Florida is a team, like I said, that will continue to take penalties until they can't. And, that's where the Rangers have to be sharp in this series, the ability to be the team they've been all season long on special teams, to be the team they've been in the postseason on the power play. And, when I say special teams, I'm not just talking about the power play. The Rangers have 4 shorthanded goals through the first 10 games of these playoffs, and they exploit teams when it comes to special teams. If they can do that, they'll probably be playing in the Stanley Cup final.
All right, so you've got the Rangers. If they win, it's going to be because of the special teams. If the Panthers win, John, what is the X factor? What's the reason the Panthers win this series?
Their ability to shut the Rangers down 5-on-5. Florida's been a very good team 5-on-5 through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. The Rangers, like I said, are not a team that wants to play a lot of 5-on-5 with you. And Florida was the best defensive team in the regular season in the National Hockey League. They won the Jennings Trophy for giving up the fewest goals over the course of the 82-game regular season. And that, to me, guys, is the difference between the Panthers team that went to the Cup final last year. They were a team that could outscore their problems, and they relied a lot on Sergei Bobrovsky. He had a great run. It doesn't have to be Sergei Bobrovsky. This is a team that plays good team defense. They're solid on the back end. They've got big bodies that play defense and are very efficient at it. They join the play offensively speaking. But the one main difference between last year's Panthers and this year's Panthers is their ability to shut opponents down. If they go to the Cup final, it'll be because I think they were the better team 5-on-5.
He's John Ollers. You can hear him on Sports USA, live play-by-play on the radio of Panthers and Rangers tonight as Eastern Conference Final gets going at Madison Square Garden. John, have a great call. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. My pleasure.
There he is, John Ollers, courtesy of our Progressive guest line, and interesting kind of look at how this series could unfold and how he thinks, while not saying it, how he thinks this series could ultimately play out.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch. And like he said, the strengths of power play versus penalty kill, your ability to score those shorthanded goals, good goaltending, which the Rangers have gotten despite a high volume of shots faced. There's a lot of interesting dynamics at play here that I can't wait to see over the course of a best-of-7 how it actually
Florida
plays out.
Panthers minus 150 series favorites, the New York Rangers at plus 130. And once again, the stat for this game, courtesy of Evan Abrams. This is just the second time in the President's Trophy era that the President's Trophy winner has been a Game 1 underdog in at least 2 series in the postseason.
They bet it, or the 2-cent line move scare you off?
I don't know. I got till we pushed back best bets, so I got 20 minutes to decide. We will talk to Jim Peterson, T-Wolves analyst, next.
This is VSiN PrimeTime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
VSiN.com. Check it out today. We got a lot of great content up on the site. Plenty of NBA analysis as we get ready for the Western Conference Finals. We've got plays in Major League Baseball and looks at other things as well, including a look at later tonight, Madison Square Garden, New York Rangers, Florida Panthers. Check it all out, as well as our odds by state, betting tools, and more. VSiN.com.
Best bets coming up in 15 minutes. Pushing it back tonight because we got a special guest joining us right now. Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals starts tonight in the Twin Cities. The Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. The T-Wolves a 4.5-point favorite, and a man who will be on the radio call tonight. Normally does TV work for Bally Sports up there in the Twin Cities is Jim Peterson, who joins us right now, Timberwolves TV analyst. Jim, here we are, and the Minnesota Timberwolves are in the Western Conference Finals after taking down the champs. And there's so many ways to look at this matchup, so many different intricacies. But we'll start with Anthony Edwards. What has he turned up in his game just this postseason to help Minnesota get to this point?
Well, I think you need to go back to the end of the regular season when Karl Anthony Towns got injured and missed the last, 18 games. And I don't know if you remember the block that Ant had in Indiana that was the game-winning block at the end of the game. And then on that same road trip had the dunk against John Collins in Utah. That's 2 of the most memorable plays of the season. And, it was during that stretch of games and then the remaining games until we got Towns back at the end when Ant really became a leader. And so one of the things that he needed to add to his game was the ability to play make, because we've seen his ability to attack and score and score in bunches and be an excellent on-ball defender. But it was 2 things. It was It was making others better, and then it was also being a better off-ball defender. And he really solidified both of those things to the end of the season. And then, he's just taken it to another level during this playoff run. This Phoenix Suns, matchup at the beginning of this playoff run, Phoenix was not a good matchup for us during the regular season. They beat us 3-0, and they beat us, in double-digit fashion and pretty much beat downs all three times. But in the playoffs, we swept them because Anthony Edwards was excellent and Karl Anthony Towns defended Kevin Durant at a high level. And we basically just kind of dismantled that Phoenix Suns team, and Ant had a large part to do with it. And then against Denver, Ant's defense on Jamal Murray in games 1 and 2, and then also in games 6 and 7 were part of the story. And then, you saw the way that he operated offensively, that he was so clutch. He was even in the game 7 when he didn't shoot particularly well. Was he 6 of 24 or whatever? He still was making an impact on the defense and hit some really timely shots that gave Minnesota separation at the end. So, he's such an amazing player. So I can't tell you what a joy he is to cover and what a great teammate he is. You'll see him in post-game pressers, always deflecting the credit and giving it to other teammates. It's what makes him unique. Not only is he arguably, if not the best player in the league, he's in the top 5. And also he's just a tremendous teammate, which makes him even more valuable.
What I'm most excited to watch tonight and in this series is this defense. And you have a team in Dallas, the best ISO scoring team in the NBA, or one of the best, versus one of the best ISO defensive teams in the NBA in the regular season. What in the world is Dallas going to do, Jim, when they're hunting mismatches? There's not that many for Minnesota.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Mike Conley. I think that he's going to match up initially on Derek Jones Jr. That's kind of always the question for us, is because Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards are such incredible on-ball defenders, they usually get the best matchups, and a lot of times those matchups are with point guards and 2 guards. So who does Mike Conley guard? And so you can put him on P.J. Washington, or you can put him on Derek Jones Jr., and with Derek Jones Jr., you saw in the first 2 series with Dallas, when he had the mismatch like that, they would run. A lot of times they put Giddey on him. They would put Harden on him, and then they would just run him into ball screens and get switches. So it's going to be interesting how Minnesota handles that. And then also, Derek Jones Jr. is a really good corner crasher too. So Mike's going to have to put a body on that guy. So it's going to be interesting to see how much that impacts Minnesota. Towns has to be really, really excellent against P.J. Washington. P.J. did not shoot the ball well in a Charlotte Hornets uniform from the corners, 24%, in fact. But, in this playoffs, he's been really good for Dallas. In fact, there were moments in games 2, 4, and 5 where he probably was their best player, and he's shooting at a 43% clip now from the corners. So, that's also a matchup Minnesota has to contend with. But we've got Jaden McDaniels on Luka and Anthony Edwards on Kyrie, and that matchup is going to be really fascinating to see how Ant does against Kyrie and try to shut his water off.
The other part of this, what is Minnesota going to do to attack this interior defense that has all of a sudden become one of the best in the NBA in Dallas?
Well, that's really a great question. Derek Lively has been fantastic as a rookie, and then I think that they did a really nice job at the trade deadline getting P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford. Gafford has been the guy that's hurt Minnesota in the past in a Washington Wizards uniform. His gravity and pick and roll game, his athleticism has been fantastic. But you're right. Protecting the rim is kind of what they do. So, we've got Rudy Gobert. And so, he's going to put gravity and pressure on the rim too. And we haven't seen 2 bigs like that in this playoff run. Phoenix didn't have anybody like that, and Denver doesn't really either. Aaron Gordon has athleticism, but not the size that those 2 have. So, Ant has been able to attack guys like this, and Rudy does a great job of screening to help a lot of those situations as well. So it's going to be fascinating. This whole matchup, I just can't wait to see it unfold. So much ISO talent offensively, as you mentioned, so much ISO defensive talent for Minnesota. It's going to be a real test of wills here.
Once again, Jim Peterson joining us here, TV analyst for the T-Wolves, also going to be doing radio work during this series as it gets going around 8:30 Eastern tonight. A lot of discussion certainly has been about Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns from a defensive standpoint. Flipping over to the Dallas Mavericks, we saw kind of an out-of-body experience from P.J. Washington, Jim, at least games 1 through 4 against the Oklahoma City Thunder. How big of an X factor do you think Washington could and will be, and what do you expect the T-Wolves to do against him from a defensive standpoint?
Well, and that's just it, because Luka is so, dynamic in pick and roll game, and, if you P.J. Washington in a spot-up role in the corner, and when they roll Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively to his side of the floor, so, his man, Karl Anthony Towns, has to make a decision. If you're in coverage, if you put Rudy Gobert into a ball screen and he's got to be in coverage trying to contain Luka, and now Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford are rolling to the same side as Towns where he's guarding P.J. Washington, it's called a single-side tag, right? So Karl Anthony Towns is going to have a decision to make. Is he going to have to go and help on the roll, as you mentioned, the athleticism of Gafford and Lively, or does he stay contained and try to stay on P.J. Washington? So P.J.'s going to get looks, and that's one of the reasons why he's shooting the ball so much better from outside the arc and in the corners than he did in Charlotte, is that Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving on single-side tags create wide-open looks for him, and, he's been knocking him down. So it's a problem, and that's why you want to be able to try to contain ball screen action with two guys. You don't want to have the guy on the single side have to tag the roller, and it's going to be a problem. So, it's one of the reasons why Derrick Jones Jr. has shot the ball at a much better clip, too, during this playoff series, is that Luka just creates all these open looks for these guys.
All right, in our last 90 seconds, everybody loves him. What do you expect from Naz Reid?
Oh, man. People are actually, there are tattoo artists who are doing free tattoos. You can get a free tattoo of Naz Reid on your arm, anywhere on your body. There was a gal here that got a tattoo on her lower lip, her inside lower lip. She tattooed Naz Reid. When you flip it down, it says Naz Reid on there. So he's become this cult hero here. He and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Kyle Anderson are bench mob, and Naz has been so great all season long. Sixth man of the year. He deserves every bit of it. He's you saw him at the end of game situation in the fourth quarter when Towns got in foul trouble in game 7, getting the finger roll at the rim. He got the tip dunk and, hit a big 3 in that stretch and hit a couple free throws. Like, he just is so big. And I just can't wait to see what Naz does in this series too.
All right. Before we let you run, you got work to do tonight. Will you be attending the NBA Finals in a couple of weeks?
I really think that Minnesota's the best team standing right now. Mm-hmm. We beat Boston early in the season when everybody was at full strength. It was one of the great games. We played both of our games at Boston were overtime games, and we actually lost to Boston in overtime without Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert. So I think we're the best team.
Jim, really appreciate it. Enjoy the game tonight.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Jim Peterson, T-Wolves analyst on our progressive guest line. Franchise came into existence in 1989. Have never made it to the NBA Finals. Best bets for tonight coming up next. It is VSiN Primetime.
This is VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
We are so close to crowning an NBA champ. I don't want it to end. And with the action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5, and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code VSiN. The crown is yours.
Alongside Jonathan Von Tobel, I am Tim Murray. Appreciate the two guests jumping by. John Allers breaking down the Eastern Conference Final, and Jim Peterson now just a moment ago discussing the Timberwolves series against the Dallas Mavericks. Both those games will start in the 8 o'clock Eastern hour. Mike Golick Jr. in hour 2 of the program. But we got a lot to get to, so let's do it. Our best bets.
I see you using an old style.
I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom.
Putting our money where our mouth is.
I like to live dangerously.
It's time for Best Bets.
Come on, Jerry, it's a lock.
All right. Yesterday, we had a nice show sweat courtesy of this guy right here. First 5 under in that Blue Jays-White Sox game. Brought it on home. So hopefully this show sweat can come home as well in the final hour of the program. You know I love them. And we're going back to the well. First period under in the Panthers-Rangers Game 1. Heard John Allers talk about it. If the Panthers can avoid penalties, keep this Rangers team off the power play, it should be more of a physical first period. Igor Shesterkin has been phenomenal in net for the Rangers. So I think we'll get a feeling out process. At least I'm hoping so. In the first period. So minus 120 is the juice found pretty much everywhere out there. Well, let's go ahead and lay that first period under on the Florida Panthers. And you know what, JVT? Let's stick with it. I think the Panthers win this series.
Wow.
Yes, the Rangers are indeed the President's Trophy winners, but I think the Panthers have just got a little extra going for them. It is a juicy price, minus 150, but I'm going to roll with the Florida Panthers to win this series. You certainly could play it just tonight, as they are sitting around minus 108 or so. The Panthers are win this game, and then you're looking at a much better price for the series, or a longer price for the series. But I'll play the long game here. We'll go minus 150, Panthers to win this series. So first period under, minus 120, 1.5 under, and Panthers on the series price at minus 150, which is available pretty much everywhere you look, including DraftKings. So those will be my 2 plays, a series play and the first period under tonight. What do you got?
Okay, so we'll go to tonight. Let's go to the total under 207.5 tonight for Minnesota and Dallas. I cannot wait to watch this series. I think the individual defense between these two teams is tremendous, but on the Minnesota side, it is exceptional. And when you look at the need to hunt mismatches, the time it'll take, Tim, to hunt said mismatches, really the only one's Mike Conley. You're going to try to get him in the post if you're Luka Doncic. I think this is going to be one. It's a knockdown, drag-out, physical battle between two good defenses and a little bit of a slower pace. I think we get under this total. It's been interesting watching the journey of this number. Got as high as 208. That was the ceiling. Got back down to about 207 is where we're at consensus now. I think there's a 207.5 out there still. One spot as low as 206.5. We'll probably close right around here, but I'm expecting a lower scoring affair between these two and a slower paced one at that. So under 207.5. We now have two. We got 2 futures for you. Ready to count them here?
Let's go.
All right, first one. I'm ready to get hurt again.
You're doing it again?
Eastern Conference Finals MVP.
God.
We're going to have my Eastern Conference Finals MVP rankings coming up later in the show. Let's just say Drew Holiday, 25-1's got a little bit of value on him. Drew, after a big day, I'm ready to get hurt one more time. 25-1 to win Eastern Conference Finals MVP. You want to know what the worst part about this is? The man who may or may not have screwed me.
That Tim Bontemps is going to say that Drew Holiday shouldn't win MVP?
Well,
or will win MVP and then not vote for him?
I mean, that's what I was getting to. Yeah, that they were singing his praises today. So I'm in! Drew Holiday, 25-1 to win Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Let's do it. Well, again, we'll have more on this coming up a little bit later. And then this is one that Tim will appreciate. We threw it in because, you know what? It's a long time away.
Riley Leonard to win the Heisman?
But it's going to be right around the corner, and we got to do it. Number 1 pick in the NBA draft.
What we got?
Donovan Clingan to go first overall, 12-1. Was chatting with the Hardwood Handicappers boys. R.I.P. Not them, the pod. I think this is time. I think the Hawks are going to look at this and go, we need a Rudy Gobert type. We need a guy that can fit here. Also, saw some reports that Clingan's working on that 3-point shot. At 12-1 in a draft like this, let's do it. Donovan Clingan, first overall pick, 12-1.
Well, Jonathan Givony said a week ago today, at the NBA Combine.
If he goes first in the NFL draft, that's crazy.
That would be impressive, that the Hawks will cast a, quote, wide net for the number 1 pick. And he mentioned 5 players that were in the mix, and one of those was Donovan Clingan, who's, by the way, was 14-1 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, now down to 12-1. Hashtag sharp card. So there you go. All right, a little NBA draft. I like it. Recapping our best bets for tonight. I am going first period under. Rangers, Panthers should be a fun sweat in the final hour of the program. I also think, that the Panthers will win this series over the Rangers, late $1.50, and then already in the can. Celtics minus 1.5 games, parlayed with the Timberwolves to win that series. That is now not available at plus 104 anymore after the Celtics emphatically won Game 1 last night.
Yes. Schrader. Get this off the screen. What are we doing? Pacers plus 2.5 games, plus 130. I should have a game in the hole. Under 207.5 tonight. Drew Holiday 25-1 to win Eastern Conference Finals MVP, and Donovan Clingan number 1 overall pick 12-1. The Clingan thing might seem a little random for our audience too. Like I mentioned, I was chatting with Kelly Bidlin and Zach Cohen, and we are coming up on the draft. And this is kind of the time where if you find value, you might want to pick these numbers off now, because by the time we actually get to the NBA draft, a lot of things are going to move. And I'm going to assume that 12-1, it's going to be available for a while, but by the time we actually get to the draft, it's not going to be worth betting on, because it might be down to 9, 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3 to 1. So I think that it's worth jumping on now, putting in the pocket, sit back and waiting. So, Donovan, I'm pulling for you, buddy.
In a year that there is clearly no consensus number 1 pick, and we talked to Zachary Cohen about it, was it last night, where the kid from France, Sarr,
Alexander Sarr, yep,
is the overwhelming favorite at minus 260, but it doesn't feel like he is worthy of that price at this point. That's fair to say.
Some thought that one Zachary Richichet as well might be a little overvalued in terms of where the market sees.
You're very good at last name pronunciation.
I study, I read. It's kind of what we're told to do here. So try my best. Forget the rest.
I have a bonus play. It's not from me.
I got a bonus one too. First period over, baby. No, I'm just playing. I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't do that to somebody. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't take the opposite side of something that supposed friend was on. Emphasis on supposed.
We both can still win. I have said from the jump.
God, I should have had that win yesterday.
Right there in the middle. Yeah, you should have.
That's so.
You definitely should have.
Come on, man.
You definitely.
That's going to be it. That's going to be it. They're going to lose it. They're going to lose in 5 now. That's going to be it.
Yeah, you definitely should have had that one. All right, bonus play. Was recording the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast earlier today with college football handicapper Brad Powers, friend of the program, and he really liked a futures play, and you have to lay a little juice. But he likes Oregon at minus 215 to make the college football playoff. You have to listen to the podcast for full explanation, but Cliff Notes version on this. He has Oregon power rated in the same realm as Georgia and Ohio State. Both those teams currently in the yes-no college football playoff market at DraftKings are minus 600. Oregon is minus 215. So he felt like there was very good value there on the Oregon Ducks. So you got to remember, 5 auto bids, you win your conference you're in, at least in the Power 5, or Power 4, I should say now, and then 7 at-large bids. Oregon is loaded, and they should make the college football playoff. So that was courtesy of Brad Powers on the podcast today. Check it out. It's up wherever you get your podcasts. A little bonus play, minus 215. Yes, Oregon to make the college football playoff. Bonus play there. All right, before we wrap up this hour, JVT, you just mentioned hardwood handicappers.
Please don't. Still hurts.
On that podcast back in November, you discussed a futures play on the Minnesota Timberwolves to win the Western Conference. The price, 30-1.
Correct.
Series starts tonight. The Minnesota Timberwolves are as high as a minus $2 favorite, meaning the hedge opportunity is pretty juicy for a 30-1 ticket. Will you hedge your Minnesota Timberwolves Western Conference future?
So you want to discuss this?
Well, we got the YouTube people here. You want to discuss the top of the hour. I'm just curious.
Okay. Yeah, well, you can check this out, vsin.com/subscribe, promo code PRIME for our YouTube audience. We really appreciate you tuning in. You get 14 months VSiN Pro access for less than $200. It's less than 50 cents a day. Absolutely tremendous. It is something that you should not say no to. And speaking of no, will I hedge? No.
Ooh.
We're in.
No hedge. Like deal or no deal. You're putting down the clamp. No hedge. All right. Game 1, Western Conference Finals tonight. It is VSiN Primetime.